Suffering in search of truth gives true meaning to the truth. Muata Ashbi, Ancient Egyptian Proverbs. A marvelous and full of enthusiastic learning to all of our avid readers of diverse literature around the world. I am your expert Egyptologist, Professor Marc Cabueñas, and at this moment, we will be exploring the prestigious literature of the Egyptians, particularly the most prominent Egyptian Book of the Dead, together with my expert wingman here, Mr. Seal as in the seal of the Egyptian Book of the Dead. Now without further ado, I think it's time to cast the literature adventure spell. Altogether, Literatura Leviosa. Oh, we have perfectly arrived on our literatura destination. Now as you can see beside me, the Egyptian Book of the Dead is indeed a collection of spells which enabled the deceased to navigate the afterlife. And did you know that this prominent title was given by Western scholars, and according to Mr. Seal, the actual title of this book would literally translate as the Book of Coming Forth by Day, or Spells of Going Forth by Day, or even the Egyptian Book of Life, which is totally contradictory to its well-known title, but that's the case. Moving on, this particular Egyptian literature is totally dissimilar with the ancient Egyptian Bible. And as whispered by Mr. Seal, once again, each of these literary work is highly unique from each other. They were specially created for wealthy Egyptians in the past, such as the pharaohs, who can really afford these costly texts, conventionally written in hieroglyphic or hieratic script on a papyrus scroll, often illustrated with vignettes showing the journey of the deceased in the afterlife. Historically speaking, the ancient Egyptians made significant adjustments in their preparation for the afterlife. Now, does this imply that ancient Egyptians were highly fascinated with death? Well, Mr. Seal says no. No, because it otherwise reflects their strong aspiration to attain everlasting life in the afterlife. Again, everlasting life in the afterlife. Everlasting life in the afterlife. Knowing that they believe that with proper preparation, they could eventually become an immortal divinity after death. And to ensure this, a massive funerary industry was established to supply those crucial materials for their post-mortem resurrection. Now, it must be recognized that these people were following a polytheistic religion, and navigating the underworld is highly imperative to them. Right, Mr. Seal? Yes! Furthermore, in ancient Egyptian mythology, one of the primary steps in navigating the underworld was to weigh a person's heart against the feather of Ma'at. Whenever their heart weighs more due to their sins, their souls will be devoured by a meat. Otherwise, they shall move forward to navigate the underworld. Now, let us talk about the origin of this book. The Egyptian Book of the Dead originated from concepts depicted in tomb paintings and inscriptions from as early as the 3rd dynasty of Egypt. By the 12th dynasty, these spells with illustrations were already written on papyrus and placed in tombs and graves with the dead in order to instruct the deceased on how to surpass the perils of the afterlife through a lot of ways. Prior to the New Kingdom, this book was only made available to the royal bloods and the elites. However, during the New Kingdom, the myth of Osiris as crucial for the soul's judgment in the afterlife has pervaded, and so several people aspire to purchase the book, by which the scribes has obliged them to have through a variety of their packages. Ranging from the New Kingdom through the Ptolemaic dynasty, the Egyptian Book of the Dead was produced in a way that it still varied in forms and sizes until circa 650 BCE, when it was fixed at 190 uniform spells, but still open to those adjustments of the buyers depending on what they can afford. Now let's get to know more about the Egyptian scribes. Shall we, Mr. Seal? Alright! Scribes were the people in ancient Egypt, usually comprised of men who learned to read and write those hieroglyphic and hieratic scripts in a scribe school. They copied text on papyrus scrolls, often illustrated with colors, and sold them to individuals for burial use. Moreover, let us discover some of those surviving works of the Egyptian scribes. Is everyone ready? Great! First in line, we have the Papyrus of Ani, one of the most vividly illustrated of all surviving copies of the Egyptian Book of the Dead. It was written in cursive hieroglyphs and illustrated with color miniatures in the 19th dynasty of the New Kingdom of ancient Egypt, explaining the detailed process when a soul leaves its body. Next is the spell 125, where the depiction of the judging of the heart of a deceased person by the god Osiris in the Hall of Truth against the feather of Ma'at was clearly introduced. Lastly, we have the Book of the Dead of Ramos, which highly showcases the name and job titles of its owner Ramos in order to ensure that each spell would really work specifically for him. Now, I would like to ask everyone, including you, Mr. Seal, do you think that afterlife is real? Well, just reflect on that particular topic for the meantime. At this moment, let us talk about the Egyptian deities who were conventionally mentioned in the book, starting with Osiris, the ancient Egyptian god of the dead and resurrection into eternal life, to whom several hymns in the book were primarily addressed, as securing his blessing upon entering the afterlife was indeed crucial for all ancient Egyptians. Next is the god of the moon, Thoth, the inventor of writing, the scribes, advisors of the gods, and the representative of the sun god Re. Also, we have the Egyptian god of mummification, Anubis, the patron god of lost souls and helpless. To continue, this book was totally significant to the ancient civilization of Egypt, as this helped ancient Egyptians to prepare for the afterlife, where Osiris, the god of the underworld, would judge them. It also alleviates their anxiety about human mortality by emphasizing the possibility of immortality. And this book was also thought as the key for ancient Egyptians to live and be one with the gods. Oh, and according to Mr. Seal, this book is highly relevant to the modern world as well, as they constitute one of the most important resources for Egyptologists like me, who wish to better understand the Egyptian religion and afterlife. Furthermore, the Egyptian Book of the Dead is composed of 200 chapters organized into 4 sections. First, these chapters describe how the deceased enters the duwa. Second, these chapters offer explanations of the Egyptian myths and the coming of the deceased completely back to life. Third, these chapters show how the deceased travels the sky in the solar barge and when he goes before Osiris to be tried at sunset. Lastly, these chapters explain that if the judgment has been favorable, the deceased enters the heaven with the other gods. To synthesize and analyze everything, the Egyptian Book of the Dead is indeed a series of rites, prayers, and myths containing the Egyptians' beliefs about the afterlife. Primarily, these spells were inscribed in the pyramids, Egyptian sarcophagi or stone coffins, fabrics with which the dead were mummified, and later on they were written on papyri, forming the prominent Egyptian Book of the Dead, which is more economically friendly than the previous ones. And as requested by Mr. Seal, I will be giving you with some interesting facts and trivias about the Egyptian Book of the Dead. First, did you know that some versions of these books were over 100 feet long? Yes, that's a fact. Second, the text of these books were often written in black ink with the titles written in red. Third, this book describes creatures guarding the underworld with scary names such as He Who Lives on Snakes and He Who Dances in Blood. And finally, did you know that the Papyrus of Ani has been preserved in the British Museum in London? Yes, you hear it right. Oh, so you want us to teleport in London, Mr. Seal? Alright, but first, I would like to inform everyone that this concludes our discussion about the prominent Egyptian Book of the Dead. I hope you learned a lot, and thank you, and ma'a el salamat.